on December 27, 1940, when Henry J. Kaiser, a 58-year-old construction magnate with no shipbuilding experience, signed a contract to build 30 cargo vessels for the British government. Established shipbuilders dismissed him as naive. America's most respected naval architect, William Francis Gibbs, whose firm created the Liberty ship plans, was among the skeptics. Kaiser's lack of experience, however, became his greatest advantage. In early 1941, Kaiser and his engineers realized conventional methods could not meet wartime demands. Kaiser's chief engineer, Clay Bedford, visiting a Ford Motor Company assembly line, returned convinced that ships could be built the same way as automobiles, by installing prefabricated components. The first shock to traditional builders was Kaiser's proposal to eliminate riveting entirely. Conventional construction required approximately 1 million rivets per Liberty ship, installed by skilled crews at a rate of about 100 per day. Kaiser proposed using electric arc welding, a technique he had mastered building pipelines. Vice Admiral Emory Land, chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, was deeply skeptical, noting the British Navy forbade welding on warship hulls and arguing Kaiser was betting America's supply lines on an unproven technology. However, desperation drove the decision. German U-boats were sinking Allied shipping faster than traditional shipyards could replace vessels, which averaged 230 days per cargo ship. In 1941 alone, 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping were lost. The Allies were losing the Battle of the Atlantic. Between January and December 1941, the Richmond shipyard, built by Kaiser's dam and highway construction crews, rose from empty mudflats. It was laid out like an automobile assembly plant, featuring open areas for prefabrication, 7 building ways, crisscrossing railroad tracks for moving massive 150-ton steel sections, and overhead cranes every 100 feet. John Riley, a 30-year veteran naval architect for Bethlehem Steel, criticized the layout as violating every principle of efficient shipyard design, but grudgingly admired that it was designed for the rapid assembly of prefabricated sections. Kaiser's next revolutionary change was his workforce. Unlike traditional shipyards that recruited generational maritime communities, Kaiser advertised across America, offering high wages and promising to train anyone willing to work. By October 1941, Kaiser employed over 10,000 workers in Richmond, fewer than 200 of whom had prior maritime experience. The simplification of complex tasks into repeated simple operations was devastatingly effective. Traditional welders trained for 4 years, but Kaiser's instructors taught specific techniques for specific tasks in about 2 weeks. Workers only needed to master the small part of the ship they would repeatedly weld. As the workforce gained experience, construction time fell dramatically. Kaiser's first Liberty ship took 197 days. The 10th took 97 days. By spring 1942, Richmond was completing ships in 70 days on average. Traditional shipyards were alarmed as this untrained workforce matched their skilled crews' production speeds. The power of prefabrication was the core difference. Instead of building the ship sequentially, from keel to deck, Kaiser's yards fabricated entire sections in parallel across the facility, such as the bow, stern, deck houses, engine rooms, and bulkheads. Completed sections, weighing up to 150 tons, were then lifted onto the building ways by massive cranes and joined by welding crews. Albert Wooding, a production supervisor, explained that while traditional shipbuilding was sequential, Kaiser's approach allowed for parallel production. For example, a 140-ton engine could be fully assembled and tested by 200 workers in an open workshop over 5 days, then dropped into the completed engine room in a single 8-hour operation, a task that previously took 50 workers 3 weeks in cramped confines.
Kaiser also challenged centuries-old practices by using simplified drawings with basic dimensions, leaving details to workers' judgment, which he called flexibility. Vice Admiral Howard Vickery, initially a skeptic who opposed reducing drawing specifications, became a supporter when Kaiser's yards began outproducing traditional contractors by 40% in March 1942 and 70% by June. Vickery admitted, "Perfection is the enemy of sufficient." Kaiser ships were not beautiful, they were adequate, and adequate ships delivered more cargo than perfect ships still under construction. A speed competition emerged between Kaiser's son Edgar, managing the Portland facilities, and Clay Bedford at the Richmond yards. The rivalry became a public spectacle. Records repeatedly fell until the Joseph N. Teal was built in just 10 days in September 1942. Although Vickery eventually ordered the competition stopped as a distraction, it served Kaiser's purpose by establishing the expectation of extraordinary speed. The ultimate demonstration came in November 1942, when Clay Bedford took a comment by Vice Admiral Land as a challenge. Bedford proposed to build a complete Liberty ship in under 10 days, cutting the previous record in half. The 47th hull, the SS Robert E. Perry, was selected for the attempt. Starting Sunday, November 8th, over 1,000 workers began the unprecedented task. The prefabrication strategy reached its peak. All major components were built, inspected, and staged before the keel touched the building way. The bow, stern, 4 cargo holds, and the 140-ton engine were completed as massive liftable units. The whole was complete 4 days into construction. On Thursday, November 12th at 3:30 p.m., just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel was laid, the SS Robert E. Perry slid into the bay. It was delivered for service 3 days later, setting an additional record of 7 days, 14 hours, and 32 minutes from keel laying to full delivery. Vice Admiral Land, witnessing the launch, admitted, "6 months ago, I would have called this impossible." Traditional shipbuilding wisdom, accumulated over 3,000 years, said you cannot build a proper ship in 5 days. Henry Kaiser has made traditional wisdom obsolete. The maritime establishment was forced to recognize everything had changed. The psychological impact was profound. Yards that had dismissed Kaiser sent engineers to study his approaches. The president of New York Shipbuilding Corporation, a prestigious yard, visited Richmond in December 1942. His report to his board revealed a complete ideological collapse, stating Kaiser achieved the impossible by treating shipbuilding as a manufacturing problem rather than a craft tradition. He simplified where they sought perfection, standardized where they customized, and trained masses of unskilled workers where they cultivated generational expertise. The result was ships built in 1/10 the time at 2/3 the cost. By early 1943, Kaiser's influence transformed American maritime production. Average construction time fell from 230 days to just 42 days by mid-1943. The United States was launching 3 Liberty ships daily, more tonnage than German submarines could sink. The quality of Kaiser's workforce provided the most devastating challenge to traditional maritime authority. The tens of thousands of women, minorities, and untrained workers, including over 40,000 women at peak production, represented a direct repudiation of the old guild system. African American workers held skilled and even supervisory roles, a level of integration unusual for the 1940s. Kaiser's democratization of skilled work challenged fundamental assumptions about labor and industrial organization. By mid-1944, Kaiser's 7 shipyards produced over 800 Liberty ships. The 18 American shipyards collectively built 2,400 vessels by this point. Victory ships, a larger design, also used his prefabrication and welding techniques. Total American maritime production between 1941 and 1945 exceeded 5,500 vessels, about 53 million tons of shipping. Commander Joseph Kenworthy of the Royal Navy observed that the U.S. was building merchant shipping at a rate exceeding the rest of the world combined. He noted the Royal Navy built the finest warships in the world, requiring years per vessel. But the Americans build adequate ships in weeks, Adequate multiplied by thousands defeats perfection multiplied by dozens.
Though the wartime boom collapsed after September 1945, the knowledge did not disappear. Kaiser's prefabrication, welding, and parallel assembly became standard practice in global shipbuilding. Japan and South Korea rebuilt their maritime industries in the 1950s and 1960s by studying and adopting Kaiser's methods, making the massive facilities in Ulan and Nagasaki direct descendants of the revolutionary practices at Richmond Shipyard. John Bunker, a maritime historian, summarized Kaiser's lasting influence. He treated shipbuilding as a manufacturing problem rather than a craft tradition, and in 36 months, he built more ships than America constructed in the entire previous century. Modular construction, prefabrication, and welded assembly are now universal standards, used in every modern shipyard worldwide. Production statistics show 2,710 Liberty ships built across 18 American yards. Construction time fell from 230 days to 42 days by 1943. Labor efficiency improved dramatically, with worker hours falling from 1.1 million for the first ships to approximately 486,000 by 1943. The most efficient yards achieved construction in as few as 350,000 worker hours. Cost efficiency improved as well, with costs falling despite rising wages. Training efficiency was equally remarkable. Kaiser's schools trained workers in specific tasks in an average of 2 weeks, compared to traditional apprenticeships of 4 years for basic competency. The key was specialization. Workers mastered specific, repeatable tasks they would perform hundreds of times, rather than learning all aspects of shipbuilding. Despite initial skepticism, the ships proved effective. Of 2,710 Liberty ships, only 200 were lost to enemy action, a 7.4% loss rate that compared favorably with pre-war merchant shipping. While some experienced structural failures due to welding defects, leading to 3 ships breaking in half, these failures represented only 0.11% of production and led to improved procedures that eliminated the problem by 1944. Designed for a 5-year service life, Liberty ships proved remarkably durable. Many remained in service for decades, with the SS John W. Brown and SS Jeremiah O'Brien still operational as museum ships today. Of the ships that survived the war, approximately 835 remained in commercial service through the 1960s. The economic impact was wide-ranging. The massive steel requirements drove the expansion of steel production, with Kaiser building the Fontana steel mill specifically to supply his yards. Employment effects caused boom towns, with Richmond, California growing from 23,000 to over 100,000 by 1943. Unexpectedly, healthcare innovation emerged. To provide healthcare for his workforce, Kaiser partnered with Dr. Sidney Garfield to establish prepaid healthcare programs that evolved into Kaiser Permanente. The technological and organizational innovations influenced industries far beyond maritime construction. Welding techniques became standard in structural steel and petroleum refining. Prefabrication influenced housing and bridge building. The principles of parallel production and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management. Professor Michael Porter identified the program as a case study in rapid capability development, proving that industrial capacity is not fixed but can be created quickly when necessity demands it. The United States went from minimal merchant shipbuilding capability to producing more tonnage than the rest of the world combined within 24 months. This suggested that perceived limitations on industrial capacity often reflect organizational constraints rather than physical impossibilities. Kaiser demonstrated that conventional wisdom could be wrong and that breakthrough performance required questioning fundamental assumptions. Admiral Chester Nimitz reflected on the strategic impact, noting, quote, "They fought across the Pacific, supplied by ships built faster than the enemy could sink them." The Japanese failed to account for Henry Kaiser, who ensured that the mathematics of attrition favored the Allies, who could build 3 ships daily, over the enemy who could sink 2. Nimitz concluded, quote, "The Pacific War was won in the shipyards of Richmond, Portland, and Baltimore, as much on the beaches of Iwo Jima and Okinawa." Kaiser's greatest achievement was the transformation of what industries believed possible. The Robert E. Peary, built in under 5 days, proved that tradition did not equal truth and that revolutionary improvement required revolutionary approaches. The approaches pioneered under wartime emergency became peacetime standards that influenced manufacturing globally. The story is a testament that the greatest revolutions often come from those unconstrained by tradition. Kaiser's workers were ordinary people achieving extraordinary results because someone organized systems that allowed them to prove it. Today, the Liberty ships are mostly gone, but the revolution they represented endures. It is present in every modern shipyard using prefabrication, in every training program teaching specific skills quickly, and in every manager who questions whether impossible simply means nobody has figured out how yet. Henry Kaiser's legacy, carved not in steel, but in transformed understanding, is the proof that human ingenuity, when unshackled from tradition and empowered by necessity, can accomplish the seemingly impossible.